I got
In this
four
video, I'm
pieces
going
of
to be walking
jam
you through
toast,
how to
four
create an
pieces of
automated test for
jam
the
toast,
sign-up
four
workflow
pieces
that
of
includes an
jam
email
toast.
validation
Yummy, yummy.
step. So in other words, this is a scenario where a new user is coming onto your application, they're signing up for a new account, and your application is sending an email to verify that the address that they entered, their email address, is in fact valid. And so to get started here, we're just going to click the Create Test button and enter in a few pieces of information to describe our test. So the name of the test, I'll call this sign-up flow. The starting URL, which we'll be testing against Monday.com, a project management tool for this example. And the third piece of information is just, are we testing as a desktop user or a mobile or tablet user? So we're testing as a desktop. When I click begin recording, Reflect spins up a browser session in the cloud and screen shares that with me. That becomes my interface for this test. So what that means is that I'm just interacting with the site as I normally would if I were manually testing it. Reflect is going to capture those actions on the sidebar and be able to capture enough information to successfully replicate that over and over again when you run your tests. So you'll see that as I start interacting with the site here, it's going to start capturing those actions on the left-hand side. So I'll just enter in a new email address. So 12345 at, I'll put in todddemo.email.reflect.run. And I'll talk about why I'm using that particular domain in a minute. And we're going to go through their onboarding process here. So it's going to prompt me to do a few things like entering in my name, entering in a password, and answering a few questions. So at this point in the process, and I'll move my picture over here so you can see this better, I might want to capture some of the information that's prompting me. So some of the information from the screen. Like for example, I might want to validate that it's asking me, hey, what brings you here today? So we can do that in a couple different ways. We could add a text validation, which is the second button on the top, and grab this text. So you can see it will, when I click and drag over it, it highlights the text and we can save it. We could also grab a visual validation if we wanted to. So for example, if we wanted to validate that the button here is in the appropriate unclicked state, we could grab that and then click on it and then validate it is now in the clicked state. So visual validations just let you capture visual regressions, things that aren't functional issues, but are issues where a user would say that that is a bug. So I would be doing that throughout the test here, but for the purposes of this example, I am going to not add any more visual validations unless I need to. So at this point, we have a loading screen here. We're going to wait for that to load for a few seconds and then maybe add a validation that it shows me that we're almost there. So we can add that here and then dismiss this and complete the registration process. So we'll call this test board and go through the rest of these defaults here. And at this point, we should now be able to validate that that email was sent. So before I do that, I'm going to grab this message at the top that says, please confirm your email address. And you'll probably notice that if I would run this test again, this test would fail. And that's because the email that I've created already exists in the system. There's already now an account for that email address. So what we actually need to do is go back to our previous step where we entered in our email and make this dynamic. So what I did was I went to this step here and clicked on details. And you can see here that this describes the actions that are going to be taken and the validations that occur when this input step occurs. And so we can modify that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this username that appears before the @ and I'm going to make this dynamic. So I'm going to replace this with a function. And here we can choose from a variety of functions like random letters and numbers, a date that's always, a certain number of days in the future. But I'm going to choose just 10 random characters. So we can make this, 11 characters or something smaller. I'm going to stick with 10. And now you can see that that function is listed here. The next thing I'm going to do is to be able to reference this value that we generated. We're going to assign this to a variable. So I'm going to click on assign to variable, and I'm going to call this sign up email. So now you can see that it's assigned that email variable. Next, what I'm going to do is that email is referenced in this step here where it says, please confirm your email address, the banner at the top. We're going to highlight the email that is now dynamic and say it should match an existing variable. And that existing variable is simply the sign up email that we've created earlier. So now this is going to validate that whatever we randomly generated, it now appears here. Now that we've done that, we can close this and we're ready to validate that the email has been sent. So I'm going to click on View Email SMS Inbox. And what this shows is a simple email client within Reflect. So I use the domain todddemo.email.reflect.run. That domain is specific to my Reflect account. Every Reflect account, if they have the email testing feature enabled, will have a unique domain. And any email sent to that domain will have those emails appear in this inbox for automation purposes. So what I want to do is I want to find the email that contains the link to validate my email. And that is right here, the please confirm your email message. So we're going to go and find the paragraph that we want to extract and click on it. And now this creates a new step, which shows me some criteria for how it's going to find the email that's sent when we go and run this test and how it's going to extract that information. So what we need to do here is for the recipient, we just need to tell it that this recipient should match the variable we established earlier, the sign up email. And we now need to extract the URL from here. So we're going to highlight the URL and assign it to a new variable called confirmation URL. The final step here is to actually navigate to that URL. So essentially simulating that we're clicking on the email. So I'm going to click on this address bar here, and you can notice that I could actually type in any URL I want, or I could click on use URL from variable and choose the URL confirmation URL variable here. So now that I've navigated to that, this is simulating the click on the email, and we should see that now we have successfully registered. So I'm going to add a final text validation for something on the screen, and we can go ahead and save and run that test. So that is an example of creating a sign up flow test in Reflect. This test is now running and will successfully replicate all those actions, including waiting for the email. Thank you for the time, and happy testing.